This is the Vegan Champion Podcast. Welcome to episode 1. I am your host, Jason Fonger, coming at you from Caledon, Ontario, Canada, coming at you solo today. Today's episode is all about setting the stage for this podcast. I'll be talking about who I am, what I do, and why I'm so fired up about podcasting and what you can expect from future episodes of the Vegan Champion Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by yours truly, Jason Fonger. If you would like to sponsor an episode of the show, please just give me an email at theveganchampionpodcast@gmail.com. But for today, I'll be sponsoring the show, so if you want to check out my website, please do go to jasonfonger.com and you can find out more about me there. But I'm going to be talking about myself today anyways, so no need for any future advertising. First episode, just want to say what's up to you guys, let you know who I am and what I'm going to be doing on this podcast. And by the time this podcast goes live, there should already be episode 2 up. So if you already know about that and you want to hear me talk to David Banana, the German YouTuber, that is episode 2. So that should already be up if you want to just skip ahead and listen to that. If you don't know me and you want to know a little bit about the podcast and stick around, the agenda for today is we're just going to talk about, number 1, who am I if you don't know me? And number 2, what is this podcast going to be all about? What is the show vision for the Vegan Champion Podcast? What kind of people am I going to be having on? What kinds of things are we going to be talking about? And who might like to listen to the podcast? So that's what we're going to do. Let's jump right into it right now. I'll talk a little bit about myself. So my name is Jason Fonger, and I am from Canada. I'm from Caledon, Ontario, Canada. I am vegan. I am a YouTuber. I'm an athlete. I try to influence positively as best as I can about veganism. And, I'm passionate about sport. And I'm really passionate about doing this podcast project. So first, I'll talk a little bit about my vegan story, so how I came to be vegan. I actually, the first real seed that was planted in my mind about veganism was probably when I was 13 years old, and I was on a snowboarding trip with my family, and I was listening to this CD called Open Your Eyes by Goldfinger. And I was reading the liner notes because I wanted to see the lyrics and just read about the band and stuff. I was really into the band, and I read the liner notes and I didn't know it, but the members of the band felt passionately about veganism, and they had written these liner notes that basically explained what goes on in animal agriculture, and it just made me sick, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. But then that same night I went out and just habitually ordered a steak. Like, that's what I used to eat. I used to eat tons of animal products. Like, I pretty much shoved it out of my mind after I had read the liner notes, and then went out to dinner and habit came back. But then when the meat was brought out onto my plate, I remembered everything I'd read, and I just couldn't eat it. I saw it as this, dead animal. I viewed it in a way that I'd never viewed food before, and it really changed me, and I stopped eating meat for about a year. I went vegetarian for a year. I didn't really learn much more about the dairy industry. I just had this really shocking experience about how I felt about eating animals, and so I just couldn't eat meat for a while. But after a while, I sort of, I was still a young teenager, 13, 14 years old, and after a while it sort of faded. That the impact that reading those words had on me, it faded, and sort of was taken over by the desire to fit in more, not have to always be eating different things, not having to be the one who's eating something different, right? Not having to have this other thing that would make me stick out and make me easy to make fun of or whatever as I was a kid. So I did go back to eating the way I used to eat. And that went on for several years. So that would have been early high school when I had that first experience reading the liner notes and went vegetarian for a year. And then I went back to eating sort of a normal diet for the duration of high school and the first year or two of university. But then in second year of university, all throughout high school and throughout those early years of university, I stopped doing sport because I used to play sport as a kid. But in high school, I stopped playing hockey, and I gained some weight, and I had some issues with acne, and I wasn't feeling very good, and I started drinking and doing these sort of recreational drugs from a from a young age, caffeine, all that stuff started to get into my lifestyle. And it was taking a toll on me by second year university. I used to get strep throat, a certain kind of strep throat infection that I would usually take antibiotics for, and I would get that pretty much every year up until I was around 20 years old. And then here I was, turning about 20 years old, reading up about all this stuff, and I came across all these articles that talked about the relationship between dairy and certain sicknesses in the body, including throat infections. And everything that I read in those liner notes back in early high school from the Goldfinger album came back to me, and I realized that I needed to be vegan because it was ethically what I believed, and now from a health point, it seemed to be what I need. So from that perspective, I had now the ethical reason, I had the health reason, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that I really started to learn about the environmental reasons. But that was enough in the second year university, 20 years old. That was enough. I don't say that I went vegan overnight, because after I read that article, I really the idea snowballed very quickly, and I did become vegan quite quickly. But there were times, in those early months when, I'd be laid out, I was still drinking, from time to time. So I'd be out late at night, and I'd have a slice of pizza, and I'd feel bad about it. Like, there were a couple of stumbles along the way, which is normal. But, I had pretty much made my mind up at that point, and that was essentially it. That's essentially the start of my vegan story. Now, since then, I've documented a lot of my story on my YouTube channel. And for anybody who wants to look back over the years, you can see sort of what I've been up to in my evolution. I sort of started my YouTube channel as I was still a musician, because when I went vegan, I was in university studying music at the time. And really, I was enjoying, like, I still love music. I love music. And I'm glad that I went and studied music at university, because it was a great experience. But at that time in my life, when I was I started finding out about veganism and was really becoming more interested in health. I really wanted to pursue that. And so shortly after graduate, well, even when I was still in university and still working as a musician, I went to a farm out near Orangeville in Ontario in Canada, and I basically just lived in a tent for 2 months throughout the summer. And I just wanted to get closer to where food came from and learn more about food and farming and agriculture and like how to be healthy and all of this stuff. And so I went to Hawaii for a little while doing a similar thing, sort of just living on farms, just learning from farmers out there. And then I, eventually went to Thailand. If you don't know me, I definitely recommend checking out my YouTube videos from the last, I think I started that channel up. It would have been, it would have been a long time ago. The channel probably goes back to around 2013. Maybe even before that, but yeah, I've basically been in Thailand for the past 4.5 years. I was teaching English in a Thai high school for the first 2 years, and then I progressed into other forms of income, YouTube and generating income online and doing consulting and things like that. So it's been a progression the past 3 years, and now it's all really coming to a head with this podcast right now, because I've realized that it's really what I want to do, which is talk about veganism, share the vegan message, highlight people within the vegan movement who are doing great things, have them on for long form discussions, and really have just really great conversations for people who are vegan to listen to and to gain insight from, because I feel like everybody in this vegan movement has something to offer. And sometimes it can be difficult to decipher what that is from a short clip of content. But I really believe that if we take the time to get inside of the minds, the great minds in this vegan movement right now, and there are so many, if we take the time to understand each one, get a solid conversation in, that we can really gain an understanding and a unity in this vegan movement that I feel is lacking. There is some infighting within the vegan community. I would say that if there is like a number one goal for this podcast, it is to unify the vegan movement, to highlight people in the vegan movement, to show what everybody is about, what everybody wants and what everybody believes, and what all the common ground is between everybody. Because the more we separate and pick people down, pick each other down, and pick each other apart for the things that we're doing wrong, there is a place for criticism, don't get me wrong. There's a place for helping each other out and helping each other to see where our weaknesses might be, but that needs to be done with the mentality of us all being on the same team, which is the vegan team, which is why I have the word vegan in the name of this podcast. And I call it the Vegan Champion Podcast because I believe that everybody in this vegan movement is a champion in his or her or their own way. So that's what this podcast is all about, is having those conversations. And I'm going to keep the podcast as vegan as possible when it comes to the businesses, the music, the people, everything. It's just going to be all about veganism, the people in the vegan movement, and just highlighting the awesome stuff that everybody's doing. So, yeah, and it could be the people on this podcast. They could be athletes, chefs, activists, whoever, as long as they are vegan, proud to be vegan, and doing something fantastic and awesome. Because there's so many people doing fantastic, awesome things out there that need to be told and need to be shared. And I want to learn. There's so many cool people out there, and I want to learn about them. So just from a selfish perspective, I want to have these conversations, and I want to bring them to people, and I want to really try to bring the best out of everybody in this movement. So that's what the podcast is all about. Yeah, what else is there to say? Anything else that I haven't said? Oh, for the audience, anybody who's listening to this, I expect there to be a lot of vegans listening to this for sure, but I do also expect there to be quite a lot of vegan curious people who want to learn more about it and keep up to date with what's happening in the vegan movement. So welcome everybody. The fact that there's vegan in the name of this podcast does not mean that we are looking down on anybody who's not vegan or trying to exclude anybody who's not vegan. On the contrary, we want to share what veganism is all about with everybody. And I'm sure that all of the guests on this podcast will agree, this is about being inclusive. We're not about excluding people who aren't vegan for whatever reason. I'm all about being inclusive and welcoming people with open arms wherever they're at right now with whatever questions. This is not a vegan podcast where I want to have an echo chamber. I do want to have some difficult discussions that are uncomfortable. I want to talk about things that are controversial and interesting and fascinating and cutting edge. So these are the kinds of conversations I'm looking to have. I'll also say that I have my own journey going on right now with triathlon, and that will be a part of this podcast, but it's not going to be the main thing. Most of my triathlon and my sport endeavors, for sure it will come up if I'm having a podcast with a fellow triathlete. But I am trying to do my best in the sport of triathlon, so that's another big part of my life. And I'll be sharing that journey because I have qualified for the World Champs next year for my age group for the sprint distance triathlon. So that is on my mind. I'm not sure if I'm going to go to that or not. It will be expensive to go, and I've considered starting a GoFundMe. I do have a Patreon set up, but I want to actually look into the cost that it's going to actually cost me to go to the World Champs and if I want to do it or not. So I'm still deciding about that, but that is on the horizon for me. And so you can expect to hear about that if you want to follow my journey to going to the World Champs. That is right now, that's sort of the goal. It would be late August or early September 2019. It'd be in Switzerland. I believe it's pronounced Lausanne. If I'm mistaken, then let me know. But I'm pretty sure it's Lausanne, Switzerland, is where the ITU Grand Final is going down in 2019. So I have qualified for that race and could potentially go and try to win, a world title for my age group in the sprint triathlon. So that would be awesome. And for sure, the reason that I would go, or actually the reason I race at all ever, is to promote veganism. This is what I got right here. This is from last year. This weekend I'm going back to the Aurelia Triathlon. So I won this race. It was actually a duathlon. The swim was canceled. I won this race overall last year wearing a vegan kit, and I plan on going back wearing the new kit this year and defending the title. So that's what this is all about. And the only reason I go to races is to spread the vegan message. If I wasn't racing with vegan on my kit, I'd feel like, why am I even racing? So Yeah, sorry, if you're listening to the podcast, maybe you can't see the kit right now. You can watch all of this on YouTube if you're watching, you know what I'm saying. So just go to the Vegan Champion Podcast YouTube channel, and you can check out the videos. I'm going to try to have as much video on YouTube as possible. And that is essentially it. Anything else that I wanted to discuss in this first episode? I think we've gone over who I am, my vegan story, what I'm kind of up to. Yeah, if you want to know more about me, check out my YouTube channel. Heaps of videos from the last couple of years, last few years, living in Thailand especially, lots of content. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, subscribe to the Vegan Champion Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell somebody about it if you enjoy it. I know this episode was really just an introduction, so maybe give episode 2 a listen. If you enjoy my conversation with David, then tell somebody else about it. We had a great conversation about eating disorders, and that's going to be episode 2. David has struggled with eating disorders throughout his life and self-harm behavior. So we had a really in-depth and I think insightful conversation in episode 2. And as I said, that should already be available. So if you want to just jump on and listen to that, then please proceed on to episode 2. Yeah, check out the podcast website is theveganchampionpodcast.com. And if you go to that site, you'll find the links to YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for the Vegan Champion Podcast. Check out my site, again, jasonfonger.com, and you'll get, again, redirected to my YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook. You just click on the icons on my website, and that'll take you to those places. I am hosting free triathlon training sessions in Chiang Mai from September 3rd to October 18th, 2018. For more information, go to my website, jasonfonger.com, and click on training sessions, and you'll find all the details about those triathlon training sessions, which is actually leading into Challenge Kanchanaburi, which is a 70.3 middle distance, or I guess that would be, what would that be? I guess it's middle distance, right? For triathlon? Middle distance. Not the same as middle distance running, is it? So anyways, those training sessions are going down in Chiang Mai. If anybody's in Thailand or in Chiang Mai, for September and October, and you're into triathlon, or even if you're just into swimming, biking, or running, you can go to my website and you can see all the sessions. There's 8 sessions a week between Monday and Thursday. So Monday and Thursday, there are a ton of sessions, between 1 and 3 sessions a day, and it's going to be really quality training, and it would be great to train with some of you guys if you're out there. So it'll be tons of fun, and if you sign up for a challenge, Kanchanaburi, then that's even better. We can all head out there and support each other during the race, and all that's totally free. Those training sessions. I'm not making any money off that. That's just me inviting people out to come train with me, because that is the training I'll be doing. But I can help you customize the session to wherever you're at. So yeah, that's what that's all about. So you can check out exactly what I'm doing for training during September and October on my website. And email me at jasonfongerinfo@gmail.com if you want to ask me any questions about training or anything of that nature. If you want to support me financially, you can find me on Patreon. I'm just kind of getting that set up. I'll put a link in the show notes or the description of this podcast if you do feel inclined to do that on Patreon. But if you also just want to support the podcast, maybe you've got a vegan business or something that you would like to promote, you can do that by sponsoring an episode of the podcast. And if you want to do that, just send me an email at theveganchampionpodcast@gmail.com, and we can chat about that. That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, whether you've been watching on the video or listening wherever you may be consuming your podcast content. I very much appreciate you spending the time with me today, and I hope that you enjoy episode 2 with David Banana from Germany. My good friend David Don, episode 2 coming at you. Thank you so much. Peace out, everybody. May you be well, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.
music for this episode of the Vegan Champion podcast was provided by Matthew Chalmers. Check him out on Instagram at Matt, M-A-T-T, Chal, C-H-A-L, Music, M-U-S-I-C. And that's his Instagram account. Check him out over there. Thank you, Matthew, for the dope beat for the episode.